Hey guys, it's Spalding here and welcome back to another video from our card discussion series. And in the last video I talked about Soul Swap, and before that I talked about Clamp, Cranium Clamp and Cowl. And today's card is Mystria's Sonic Guardian. And as I did in the last videos, I will break down this card in terms of card advantage, in terms of tempo, and in terms of virtual card advantage, and then I will go over the fun and casual environment and then over the competitive environment. So let's just start with the card advantage part, and I will bring out another card which might be comparable in Marinomancer, also being 5 mana and 2k. And when you play Mysterias from your hand, you don't gain card advantage because you have a card in your hand, now you have a card on the board. It is plus minus 0 in terms of card advantage. On the other hand, if you play Marinomancer and then you can draw up to 3 cards, you gain card advantage of up to 3, and usually if you build your deck around Marinomancer you will most likely draw 2 and also in some numbers 3 cards, so you gain a plus 2 or even plus 3 if you play Marino. So why should you play Mysterias then? Well, it's just the threat it has for being on the field, and this is the virtual card advantage aspect, which I will go over here before I talk about the tempo. After you play a Marinomancer, the effect has already resolved and your opponent can easily ignore the Marinomancer because it only has 2k, and usually you don't play any evolutions which you can put on Cyberlords in your Marinomancer deck anyway, and yeah, you can just ignore it. Mysterias, on the other hand, has a really huge value when it is being left untouched, and you can draw an even higher number of cards than you can with Marinomancer, of course, when your opponent can't answer it on his turn. So the quality of these two cards when they are on the battlefield really change, because Mysteria's quality is much higher than Marinomancer is. So the virtual card advantage here after being on the field is clearly in favor of Mysterias. And of course the possibility to transfer this virtual card advantage into real card advantage after drawing a bunch of cards. Now in terms of tempo, this is a +1 because you deploy a card out of your hand onto the battle zone, and now you have one more creature, so it's a +1, but also playing out a vanilla creature is a +1, and Ballas is far more superior here because you have only spent 2 mana instead of 5, and also gaining +1 tempo. So let's talk about the fun environment here, and is Mysterias a problem in a casual when both players play casual decks. And let's just bring up some cards which you won't find in any competitive decks, and usually only find in a fun environment, and most likely they kind of conflict with Mysterias because Mysterias costs 5 mana, and also some of your Evo baits, demon commands, angel commands, or all angel commands cost at least 5 mana. Maybe some of your combo pieces like Salagrass cost 5 mana, and you really want to play these cards instead of Mysterias. On the other side, when your opponent is playing Mysterias, it doesn't really interact with your game plan, and in a fun and casual environment you are more focused on developing your own game plan and getting out some janky creatures or your evolution creatures which have a really huge effect on board. So Mysterias doesn't stifle you there, so I think it's perfectly fine when my opponent is playing Mysterias. I say, okay, he is most likely drawing a bunch of cards, but at least I can deploy my own threats. But of course, Mysterias drawing a bunch of cards is in a long-term game a problem, and you, as I said, you are most likely focused on your own game plan, so you don't pack that much answers for your opponent's cards like Mysterias. So the natural counters this card have, you won't see them as much in a fun and casual environment than you would see it in a competitive environment. So that's at least in my opinion, is the reason why Rias is perfectly fine in a fun and casual environment. So let's talk about the counters to Mysterias, and the most prominent one, which you also see quite often in competitive format, are fire kill spells, which not only kill Mysterias but also gain you some kind of advantage in terms of mana, which we see here in Volcano Charger, or also clear other creatures which you might have on board in Searing Wave. So of course there are many more fire kill spells which are played, like Phantom Dragon's Flame, Burst Shot, Blizzard of Spears, and so on, but I wanted to use these two as a natural counter, as an example. So in a competitive environment, Mysterias needs some kind of setup, and the most likely setup you will see is if you play it together with Nature, and most prominently there are Brosam Tribe and Soul Swap. Brosam Tribe, of course, because Mysterias can come down a turn earlier on turn 4, and therefore other cards like Burst Shot or Blizzard of Spears can't immediately answer Mysterias, because you played it on turn 4 and your opponent is playing these cards on turn 6, unless of course they played a Charger on their own earlier. So yeah, Brosam Tribe really nice here, and of course with Soul Swap you can swap your Brosam Tribe for your Mysterias, and as I discussed in the last video, Soul Swap basically only costs you 2 mana, so you have 3 more mana to play something else and immediately trigger the effect of Rias. So just a quick example here: if you have something like 4 mana, you played your Brosam Tribe, and your turn comes around, you can charge another mana. Of course, Mysterias has to be in the mana zone for that. You can tap 3, play your Soul Swap, and charge your Brosam Tribe, bring out your Mysterias, and then you can use your 3 mana which you have left to deploy another creature and immediately trigger a Mysterias effect. So this is one setup which you might face, and another setup is this one, in just protecting your Mysterias. So ideally with your 3 mana left, you would want to play the Palaolesis guy, and it really saves Mysterias from these small fire removal spells, or even mass removal in terms of Searing Wave or Burst Shotting, giving it plus 2k on your opponent's turn. So with 4k this card can survive many more kill spells, and even if your opponent is playing something like Holy Awe and is tapping your creatures, it still has 4k, so your opponent has to destroy Palaolesis first and then Mysterias, which they might not can. And even something like Colon is nice here too, because you can, or any other card which only taps 1 creature, because you can block, of course, with Pala even if they go over it, and can save your Mysterias and deploy your own creatures the next turn and drawing cards for them. And also with Petrova, this card you could just call Guardian and Mithridas immediately gets plus 4k and a 6k, and Petrova is also harder to remove than Pala because you cannot target Petrova. So even a kill spell like Blizzard of Spears would of course kill Petrova but wouldn't kill Mithridas. So there are far less outs for Mithridas, and in my opinion you should only play Mithridas if you have some kind of setup in Brotham Tribe and Soul Swap, or with Pala, Olesis and Petrova, at least in a competitive environment. Because paying just 5 mana for 2k and then getting immediately destroyed and you give your opponent more value with discards is not really nice and or fine. And if you are not playing any of these 4 cards, then you should usually try to switch to a better card advantage giving card, which does something which when it comes into play, for example like Marinomancer. Of course there are more counters to Mithridas, which are also played in a competitive environment, and these are mana burn cards, Miraculous Plague, which you see in either Fortress Burn or Mana Bonanza, and of course this card. Because if you burn your opponent's mana and then they can only play like 1 or even 0 creatures per turn, so they won't get the effect of Mithridas quite often, and these shells, Mana Burn and Bonanza, are control shells which themselves play only a couple of creatures, so when you play Mithridas you won't benefit from your opponent playing creatures because they just play spells, and if your mana has been burned down to like 2 or 1 or even 0, you can't play multiple creatures a turn, which you really want to do with Rias. So these are just some natural counters, and even more Miraculous Plague because it instantly answers your Rias on board without deploying a creature, and also dealing with 3 other cards, 1 other card on the field and 2 in mana. So yeah, really natural counter here. Of course we have some other cards which can deal quite nicely with Mithridas, and that are Coral and Basic Zeal. Yeah, Coral, of course it comes into play and your opponent can draw 1 card with Rias, but it will also get bounced back to the opponent's deck, so your opponent gains a card, but you also win in terms of card advantage in removing 1 creature from the field. So it's if you play Coral on an already established Rias on board, it's ±0 in terms of card advantage because both players get a +1, and you also set your opponent down in tempo in gaining a +2 in tempo in terms of Coral, deploying creature and removing a creature, of course, and your opponent has to spend 5 mana again to put out Rias, and sometimes they can't afford it if you have other creatures which you can attack with, and they have to answer the board and not deploy their Rias again. And Basic Zeal, of course, it's just trading a 1-for-1. But of course you have spent 8 mana for dealing with a 5 mana creature, so it might not be that profitable for you because you most likely can't play another card if you played Basic Zeal this turn. But yeah, it's still a fine way of dealing with Rias, and even if this guy gets buffed by Petrova, you can still run over it with 8k. And of course we have like the natural counter to most of the cards I've discussed, and yeah, it's Fire Nature Rush again. Because Fire Nature Rush mostly ends the game before your opponent has a chance to play Rias, and if they can afford to play Rias because it cannot block and doesn't affect the board immediately, then you are in a losing situation anyway with Fire Nature Rush. So again, Rias has a couple of counters in a competitive environment with Fire Skill, kill spells, with Mana Burn, with just good cards, I guess, in general, and Financial Rush, and requires some setup if you want to play it. Of course, another setup would be that you can discard your opponent before you play Rias, so they will most likely not have an answer or have to top deck an answer. Yeah, you can also do that. But that would count for like everything. Yeah, you can just say I can play like also any amount of these cards when they come into play and survive one turn. They are really huge because of their effects, and by ensuring that they survive a turn, you can just reduce the options your opponent have by discarding them. So this argument would count for many more cards and not only for Rias. So not quite valid here. And again, we have the game where I ask you to guess the number of copies of Mysterias which ended up winning the IDC tournaments. We had 7 so far, at least when this video is recorded. And now you guys can guess how many copies ended up winning out of the 28 possible cards. So the answer is 4. 4 copies ended up winning IDC, and it was and the 4 copies were all in one deck. It was the Hydro Hurricane deck from Hymne, and of course we don't have the deck profile of the first winning deck. Maybe there were some Mysterias there, but I doubt it. So yeah, 4 copies. And if we go to the top 4, again, 7 IDCs, 4 copies, but 4 decks in top 4, of course. It's 112. Out of the 112 copies, possible copies, how many would you guess ended up in the top 4? And you can write it in the comments down below, and this result might surprise you. It's also only 4 copies. Yeah, it were these copies which also won the tournament, and in my opinion, Mysterias it's only viable when you have these 2 cards, or at least we can say that, at least from our data in the 7 tournaments. I'm not sure how many copies in total were in even in the top 8 or in the whole tournaments which we had. We had always over 10 participants, and I of course don't know every single deck list. Yeah, but only the copies which also had some form of setup in Pala Ulysses, and not even Borsam Tribe and Soul Swap, because you still have the issue, even if you play this card, you need to have multiple cards here, and still Rias would only be 2k and could be easily removed by the fire section here, or also something like a Terra Pit if you start and have 6 mana before your opponent has 5. So if you are not starting, you will only have 5 mana when Mysterias comes down. So Terra Pit isn't an answer here, but yeah, you can always play some Charger too. So yeah, in my opinion, in a competitive environment, Mysterias is definitely not a problem. And oh yeah, I'm I'm coming up with another counter to Mysterias, and another counter would be a deck out, because with Mysterias you want to draw more cards, and if your opponent is playing something like Slash Charger or is just trying to stall the game until you run out of cards in your deck, then your opponent is happily to see you draw more cards, because it gets them closer to their goal of decking you out. So quite a lot of counters in a competitive environment, and again, no, these counters are not played just because Mysterias exists. They exist by being a solid and really good game plan beforehand, and yeah, it's just a coincidence that they interact really well with Mysterias. So yeah, I hope you guys liked this discussion, and you can write in the comment down below what you think about Mithrida's, and it's a quite also highly debated card in some forums or in some communities, and I would like to hear your opinion on this card. And yeah, also feel free to check out the other card discussion videos with Clamp, SoulSwap, and Cowell. And also just a reminder, if you want to see another card discussed by me, you can write it in a comment down below. And yeah, see you in the next video. Bye.